my boss put out a nativity scene. The store I worked in was a long, narrow store. Our ice cream cases were right down the middle of the store, and between the cases we had a shelf, and that's where she put the nativity scene. So one night while I was there, of course I was in school studying the Bible, studying ministry, and so I learned that the Magi weren't there then. And so I took the Magi from the nativity scene and I moved them way down the counter. Next day I came back to work and they were moved back. So I moved them way down the counter again. Next week I was working with my boss one day and she said, somebody keeps moving those wise men. Their journey was a journey of discovery. They were led by a star, by light. It was an illuminated journey, and they knew they were going to go find a newborn king. They didn't really know very much else about it. And so it was a mystery for them. But they were on a journey, discovering something. Today starts a journey for us, 3-week series that I hope will be an opportunity for you to learn something more about God, but also to learn something more about yourself. This is a journey of discovery. The theme verse for this series is Ephesians chapter 2, verse 10. For we are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. In just a second, I'm going to read you some alternate English translations, one of which refers to us as a work of art. Another translation refers to us as God's masterpiece. You may not have often thought of yourself that way. You may not have woken up this morning, looked in the mirror and said, what a work of art. Because you know your imperfections. I often wonder, how would the Mona Lisa feel if the Mona Lisa could think and had feelings and could look in a mirror? Would the Mona Lisa see herself as a work of art, as a masterpiece? Or would the Mona Lisa see the cracks in her paint and how she's become faded over the centuries? Would the Mona Lisa see nothing but imperfections and not be able to see that she is actually a masterpiece, a work of art? Would she be jealous of all of those new paintings done by lasers that are really brilliant colors? Well, we tend not to look at those and see them as works of art or masterpieces. What would the Mona Lisa think of herself? And perhaps you're the same way. But the Bible tells us that you are God's workmanship. You are God's work of art. I found that reading various translations helps me understand passages in the Bible because different translations will have a slightly different nuance. And so this particular passage, when J.B. Phillips translated his New Testament, he worded it this way: For God made us what we are, created in Christ Jesus to do those good deeds which He planned for us to do. The New Revised, for we are what He has made us. For we are what He has made us. And the Jerusalem Bible, which is a great translation, says, we are God's work of art. That's you. Isn't that great? Isn't that great news? Isn't that exciting? That you're a work of art? That you are a masterpiece? Just the way you were made. Do you have imperfections? Of course. We all do. We're all broken people in some ways. We all have certain imperfections because of the way we've lived, the choices we've made. But you are a work of art. You're a masterpiece sitting in that pew today. Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created. And right there, in those few words, we understand two things about God. The first one is that before this world was created, God already existed because God created it. The second thing is that God is creative. The first activity the Bible records to inform us something about God is that God created. God is created. Very important characteristic to know about God. For God, creativity is not just an activity of the brain, not just something God sits around and thinks about, but that God's creativity results in something tangible and real. And this world is an example of God's creativity. In the old movie, Oh God, George Burns, portraying God, was posed with the question, did you really create the world in 7 days? And George Burns says, nah, I thought about it for 6 and did it all in one. In the beginning, God created the world, the universe as we know it. Skipping down to Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, it says, let us make man in our image, male and female. And so God created people, human beings, in His image. Male and female are created in the image of God. And as a result, you and I are what's called in Latin, imago Dei. That's a good Latin phrase. Imago Dei, image of God. You are imago Dei, I am imago Dei. Image of God, created in that image. And in that image, you and I then take on and possess the characteristics of God. And one of those characteristics we've already mentioned is God's creativity, which means you, in the way God created you, are created. Creativity needs to not just be left in the domain of the arts. That is certainly a great example of creativity. Music is a great example of creativity. We've seen that today in the music that Mark and the rest of the band led us in this morning. It takes creativity. But creativity is something that needs to not be left just in the domain of the arts. You can look at a painter and say, that's a creative person. You can look at a sculptor and say, that's a creative person. Look at a ballet dancer and say, that's a creative person. But creativity is expressed everywhere. It's just that you and I don't normally look at a plumber and say, that's a creative person. And yet, every single person possesses God's creativity because every single person possesses that image of God. One of the things I've learned is that when I am trying to embrace something new, sometimes I need help. And so I'm going to give you some help today to embrace this idea that, first of all, that you are imago Dei, and second, that you are created. And so what I'd like you to do is turn to somebody and just simply say, I am imago Dei. Go ahead, please. That's good. Now, it's also true that many times it helps reinforce a lesson we're learning when we pronounce that blessing on someone else. So I want you to turn to someone and say, you are imago Dei. Make sure no one gets left out. Turn to someone else and say, you are imago Dei. Gary's back here on the video projector. Let's gang up on him. And everybody all together, let's say to Gary, Gary, you are imago Dei. 1, 2, 3. Gary, you are imago Dei.
And you all are imago Dei.
Also, because you are created in the image of God, imago Dei, you are created. You possess God's creativity inside of you. And so now I want you to turn to someone and say, I am created. This one's a little harder for some. Because you've never thought of yourself that way, but you are. So turn to someone else and say, I am created. I am created. Now I'm going to second person singular. You are created.
You are created.
Turn to someone else and say, you are created. All right, now who in this room is imago Dei?
I am imago Dei.
Who in this room is created?
I am creative.
Those are very important lessons for for you to keep in mind during these 3 weeks. And if you've never thought of yourself that way before, you've just learned something new about yourself. That you're creative. Now, I've been here long enough that you know I periodically will share some resources. And I want to share 4 resources with you. For those of you who are interested in exploring this idea of creativity further. The one is a little booklet written by Francis Schaeffer, who was a theologian who was very influential back in the 70s and 80s, really in the international church. This is a little pamphlet called Art and the Bible. And in this, he shows all of the ways, or many of the ways, that the arts are involved in the experience of the Bible. The way craftsmen and different artists use their talents in worship of God. It's a wonderful little booklet, Art and the Bible by Francis Schaeffer. Another one is a book written by his wife, Edith Schaeffer. It's titled The Hidden Art of Homemaking. Originally, this book was titled simply Hidden Art. And I personally think that was a much better title, because something called hidden art might attract a wide variety of readers, where the hidden art of homemaking, none of you guys are going to pick this up and read it. Because you don't want to get stuck with that stuff. And a lot of women are going to shy away from it because, well, just because. I already have enough to do. But the purpose of this book is really to show how creativity is expressed through just normal, common, everyday life. In the way you cook, in the way you clean, the way you decorate your home, the way you decorate your office, the way you care for your car. All of those things in one way or another express your creativity. Now there's a practical side to that too. You might have a chair at home because it's comfortable, it's your favorite chair, it may not look creative at all. That happens. But if you look around the areas where you live, look at the things you do, you will find expressions of creativity. You may have never thought of it that way, but it's there. Another book I recommend is called Modern Art and the Death of the Culture by H.R. Bookmacher. It's really a wonderful book because in this book he analyzes why the church let go of the arts. There was a time when the church hired people to just be artists. They were on salary from the church to sculpt, to paint. And somewhere along the way somebody got practical and said, why are we doing that? And we lost it. The arts are very important. I don't want to make the arts the only expression of creativity, but they're very important. It's very important to be involved in the church. And not just in a useful way, where we use music to worship, but that we make sure that the arts are an expression of God's creativity and an expression of worship. And so whether it's playing music, whether it's painting a picture, any expression of arts, that we make sure we recognize God's creativity there as well. Wonderful analysis of that. The 4th book is titled The Art of the Start, and it's a business book. It's written by a guy named Guy Kawasaki, who at one point was employee number 50 at Apple. Guy's been very involved in Silicon Valley for years, and he wrote this book for the benefit of anyone who's starting something new. And he says this in his introduction. You might be starting the next HP in your garage, or you might be starting a church. He shows how you can use your creativity to start new things. And Guy, as a Christian, is naturally very interested in helping people understand their God-given creativity, whether it's the business world, or the church, or some other setting. So The Art of the Start by Guy Kawasaki. It's a wonderfully encouraging book. You are Imago Dei. You are creative. And you have many different ways that you can express that creativity. The next 2 weeks, my wife Pam will be part of the lessons as well. And we'll be sharing with you some ways ways to understand yourself better. And in doing that, to then be able to understand ways that you can plug into the church that won't be a hardship for you. Ways that you can plug into the church that will be actually encouraging for you. Because when the right people with the right collection of gifts and passions plug into the right spot in church, it's just as natural as breathing. One of the reasons you've tried to do some things and haven't been happy doing it is because it's just the wrong spot for you. But there's a right spot for you. And over the next 2 weeks, we're going to help you understand from a practical perspective as well as what we might call a more spiritual perspective, where that can be. Now this material, which we've taught in the past in the context of classes, are things that have not only enhanced people's involvement in church, but it's also helped enhance people in their careers. I've had people who've changed careers as a result of this material. They suddenly understood why they hated their jobs, and they found a new career that they loved. That's how much impact it can have. I've had other people who've gotten advancements in their career directly related to understanding this material. It's also material that will help enhance your home life. Because it'll help you understand what are the things around the house that you're better at than your spouse. Or that your kids are better at than you. And so you get the right people doing the right things at home. And it's better for everyone. Just like it is at church. Nelson Mandela, the South African leader who recently passed away, once wrote, "Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, or gorgeous, or talented, or fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. You are a model of man, created in God's image. And you are phenomenal, just the way you are here. Now we're about to do something that is very humbling. We're going to take communion. The reason communion is humbling is because it reminds us of our brokenness. It reminds us of our sin. But it's also there to remind us that we are forgiven of those sins. That we are healed of the brokenness. You need not be a member of this church to come and take communion. The only thing we ask is that you be a believer in Jesus. And if you walked in those doors today and you were not a believer in Jesus, you can change that right now. All you have to do is simply pray and say, Jesus, I believe in you. And by the time you come up here to take communion, Jesus will be living in your heart